This conference will now be recorded.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's Anthony with the CBAA here. I might as well get started. We had a list of 65 invitees, of which about 30 or so were scheduled to attend. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join us here. This is our first Flight Ops Leadership Conference call, and the intent here was to really, as I was going across the country, trying to get to a place where we were sharing some data, not only from the association sharing data that's of interest to you as our flight ops leaders across the country, but really to connect you with some of the best practices and ideas and fellow industry partners that are out there doing some great stuff. So a little bit of the sort of the rules of the road here. If you're online, there is a chat feature. I've repeated this at the beginning. I'm going to just type something in here. But what I'd encourage you to do is, if you're online, feel free to send a chat through the tab here. And what I'll be able to do is, as we're moving along, just reference this chat window, and I'll go through in chronological order. Thanks for the team at Pratt, the test. I read you 5 by 5. But I'll be able to check that and then periodically take some time to respond to any questions as they come up. What I will do is end up, right now, the mics are actually pretty good. We've got everybody with an open mic right now. What I tend to do is if we're getting any feedback, I'll quickly mute all of them. But what I'll end up doing is after each slide or periodically, I will stop, unmute the microphones and ask if there are any folks that are called in, if there are any questions, and that way we can get to them. Last, with respect to rules of the road, is I've started a recording. I want to make this available after the fact to those attendees that were not able to make it. In addition, if you that are on the call now, if you want to follow back to something that was said, or frankly, if you want to share the content with someone that you think should hear it, you'll be able to get the link and send it to those that you need to. So let's move into the agenda. From our team, the CBAA team, we've got Aime and Merlin here. They are muted right now, but they're here to support not only this conversation, but you all going forward. So from time to time, I will, Merlin will have some elements will come in, and Amy's here to help facilitate if there are any additional questions or contact. So we're going to start from an agenda on the ideas of airport access, everything from the hot button issues like Pearson, Montreal with ADM, and then broadly speaking, what are some of the best practices and approaches the association is taking with our airport authorities? We're going to talk about the compensation survey. So the CBAA compensation survey, how it's out there, how it can help you, and why we need your support in making it effective. We're going to talk about that Transport Canada, actually the letter from Minister Garneau to operators regarding winter operations and their request, his request to have some information back by June 30th rather, and what the association is doing to help you draft that letter to perhaps make your life a little bit easier. We'll talk a little bit about NAV Canada, some of the work that we've been doing with them on everything from service levels, ADSB, the NCAC, kind of the background, the backstory that CBAA has in support of NAV Canada. We will talk about very quickly the schedulers and dispatcher scholarship. Really a call out for you on your teams if you've got someone that's in your organization that you feel would benefit from some additional training, perhaps attending a convention. In effect, this is free money for you to help them in their performance plan and whatever training or whatever goal that you'd like them to achieve. Last, and really the reason for this call is the Convention 604 operator special session planning. Our convention is July 9 through 11 in Calgary. Quick reminder, and I'll say it again, is that each of our members receives a free sort of all access pass. And so I'd really encourage you to check those calendars and see if you can make it out there, not only for the 604 session, but really, again, to connect with some of your peers in the industry, share some of those best practices so that we all get better. So let's go to the the start of this airport access. I'll pause there now with the questions. Any questions? Nothing's online, but just want to make sure everybody hears me 5 by 5, those in line and those online. Looking good. I'm seeing a couple come through. Okay, good. So let's talk a little bit about this operational information, NAV Canada, and let's start the conversation about airport access here. For those that are on the line, I'm not sure if you're aware of seeing this link. I've included there, you can see it, the NAV Canada link on where you find the OIS. Let's start first with some language, things that will get you comfortable in understanding what's happening with the airports. You know, the 4 majors that are here, Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver. Everything that NAV Canada is doing, you know, certainly from their strategy, when it relates to what they call the 4 majors, these are the airports that are of consequence. And why I wanted to bring you here first is to kind of get that piece of awareness out there, that NAV Canada thinks of these airports, looks at making investments in their business at these airports. And it's important for us to know what impacts are happening there because it does impact our operations. The next piece I'd call out here is the aircraft arrival rate. I've muted the mics just for some hot mics that were there. The aircraft arrival rate here. So this site allows you to understand in the runway configurations that are out there what the arrival rate is at the airport. So in this case, look at Pearson at 56 when I took this yesterday, Montreal at 38. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up here is that one of the things when we talk about airport access, you know, you'll run into where NAV Canada will have a limitation, a traffic limitation on what they can manage. Let me go back there. And it's important for us to understand that NAV Canada's got a limitation in terms of moving the aircraft that are into and out of the airport. And then there's also the airport authorities. And really the issues that we have with airport access relate to what the airport authorities declare as sort of their maximum. In the case of Toronto, I'll tell you that the GTAA manages the airport to 90 movements an hour, and that's in the east-west operations, so the 05s and 06s and such. But NAV Canada can move about 120 aircraft per hour in those perfect conditions. So often the challenge we've got is, especially when it comes to airport access, is informing the airport authorities and making sure they're aware of our operations. But I wanted to point this out here because from time to time, I think this site will help you plan your operations and get a direct line into the issues that NAV Canada is seeing. Last to point out on this is certainly any weather issues that are related. So in the case of some of these US locations like LaGuardia, JFK, Boston, et cetera, and the Canadian airports that would be impacted by whatever, in this case, the weather events that are going on there. So when we started this conversation about airport access, I wanted to start here because we need to know the arrival rates in great conditions for some of the airports that we operate into and out of. In the case of Toronto Pearson, you know, it's been a long and winding road in terms of the work that we've undertaken. We've got a GTA technical committee that consists of a number of the operators, Sky Services represented here in Toronto, Exec Air, NovaJet, Chartrite. We collaborate with these based operators to ensure they are aware of the changes, if any, that are proposed by GTAA. Where we are now is this. As you've seen, we've pushed back quite a bit on the OCS, the coordination, that reservation system. You remember that there's also this ACDM, the Airport Collaborative Decision Making. Interesting that right now, one of the big majors, actually the major carrier in Canada, has had some challenges with the implementation of ACDM. I don't know that they see the same benefits that the operator or the airport operator would say that they would see in using this system. Why I mention that is that it's surprising to think that Air Canada's sort of non-support of ACDM benefits us in that that prevents the program from rolling forward. Now, with that said, work is ongoing. I spent this week, you know, we're going to talk about the NCAC in a little bit, and, you know, the business aviation representation that we had here. But I spent this week in Toronto. In fact, I'm still here talking to the teams at NAV Canada and the Airport Authority about this whole issue. And of importance was, you know, how does NAV Canada play its part in helping us educate the Airport Authority about the capacity? But where I see Toronto going, and one of the reasons why this call came about, is I want to make sure that you're getting timely information. Often you'll get things like emails from Ops Group or other places. And some of the challenges we run into there is that, if they're not at the table, you just get a lot of, as I would just borrow from the US, a lot of fake news that comes out of some of that information. And so what we're going to commit to doing for you, and it certainly helps me, is to get accurate information out in a timely manner. And, right now we use a number of different places. I'll tell you, it's our CBAA, the forum itself. I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on that. We can certainly pause if there's any questions on the forum. LinkedIn, one of the things I like to share is that LinkedIn for us, from an association standpoint, we are, in fact, in terms of engagement, the #1 association in Canada. That means the folks that like, that comment, and share on the messages that we're putting out there. We're getting heard. And what I appreciate is that that's one avenue that we can get this message out to you. So we're going to push it out on the forum, we're going to push it out on LinkedIn, and we're going to continue with traditional email. But I want to make sure that we're getting this timely information out to you. I do believe that ACDM, the work itself, is still ongoing. There is talk that if the airlines start to acquiesce, in this case, if AC starts to acquiesce to the program, they may think to run a trial in September. But stay tuned with that. That is the update with Toronto. No questions on the chat that I can see. And maybe what I'll do is I'll unmute all the microphones right now, and we're talking about Toronto Pearson. So everybody's mic is live if you've called in, and I'll give it a moment. Any questions out there on the lines on Toronto Pearson?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. You guys are too easy on me now. This is, don't be shy. So what I'll do is I'll mute the lines again as we continue the conversation here. Okay, so Montreal, our next opportunity. First, I want to call out a couple folks that help us. We talk about those 4 majors. We can't do any amount of work with success if we don't leverage you folks in the market. And I want to make special attention here to Simone with Sky Service, Patrick with Exec Air, and Serge as well with Exec Air. This is the forum of our Montreal Technical Committee. And, again, in the same situation as Toronto, you've got NAV Canada's capabilities, you've got the Airport Authority, in this case, ADM, and the rollout of this, which is near conclusion now, this block of BA operations during the runway construction event that's being undertaken in Montreal. Now, I think what's important to go back is to flash back to a year before and saying that but the year before, business aviation had a total ban in Montreal. And through this technical committee, and it's not easy, but we've been able to achieve a bit of success in terms of flexibility, moving to an hour less of total ban and only on IFR days. And I recognize that, in some ways that to some can sound like not much success, but we're dealing here with an airport authority that's maturing in its understanding of the business aviation impact. And we continue to push for those efforts. I know with the Grand Prix weekend rolling around, that's going to be on us. But knowing that we're nearing completion of that first phase, why I say next opportunity, certainly through the technical committee and with your support, those that are on the line, we need to pay particular attention to the fall. The runway construction efforts at Montreal will continue, and we need to ensure that we do not have this kind of total ban. One of the things I point out also as well is the idea that if you check your NOTAMs, Montreal is not to be used as a divert airport except for those based aircraft. So if you're operating into Ottawa or points east of Montreal, maybe it's Quebec City, etc., take caution with your crews on their alternate selection. So maybe I'll pause there. I don't see any questions on the chat. I'll open all the mics. There they are now. And see if there's any questions on what's happening in Montreal or if there's any comments out there.
Anthony, it's Simon.
Hey, Simon, go ahead.
Right, okay, so I just have a quick question following our presentation Tuesday morning at the council. What's the next step? Will something happen from the council to the people managing NAV Canada here in Dorval?
Absolutely. So thanks for that. So yeah, what happens now is that we just wrapped up yesterday. We actually, through that conversation,
And then I'll be right back. I'm not going to go any further.
Okay.
there we go, I've muted those calls. What happened there is we completed the NCAC meeting yesterday. The traction that we got, the awareness that you all brought to the concerns of business aviation was well adopted in that meeting. In fact, it was great to have, I'll call out Fred Jones with Helicopter Association, a partner to us as well. But while we were meeting with GTAA, he was bringing up some of those slot issues and how come business aviation is impacted. So what this does is we stress the importance that NAV Canada, its role in helping us educate the airport authority. So our next steps are going to take not only with Rudy with NAV Canada, but it's this message will be sent to the chair of their board. For those that are on the line, and it's going to be one of the topics we bring up on NAV Canada, but we've got the CBAA has the opportunity to nominate one member to the board of NAV Canada, which represents the non-commercial user. I say all of this to say that through the NCAC and continued pressure there, we're able to get to a place where NAV Canada can say, hey, this is the exact limit. And then we can turn to the airport authority. Okay, well, if NAV Canada has told us that the aircraft movements per hour under these conditions is X, the airport authority is trying to manage the amount of commercial traffic that's going into and out of the terminal buildings. It's our job then to educate them to say, well, as a reminder, business aviation does not encroach and does not use any of the infrastructure, whether that's CBAA at the terminal, the gates at the terminal, et cetera. And great that we're in non-de-icing, nothing to do with any sort of central de-ice facility. So it's a long way to say that we are cultivating that partnership with NAV Canada so that we can go to the airport authorities with the hard numbers, with the truth. I'm still actually compiling from NAV Canada. One of the things that I want to develop for the association is a snapshot of all business aviation movements to all major Canadian airports, so that we can, we're never really caught flat-footed in understanding, hey, business aviation represents maybe 15% of the traffic at this airport, 40% of the traffic over at that airport, so that we can inform those airport authorities of exactly why we need their support in being fair with access to the airport. Does that answer things, Simon?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you allow me, Anthony, I just want to say, tell the group that the reason why we brought this to the NAV Canada Council is that right now they're doing work on the threshold of 24 right, and as of September 7, right after the week after Labor Day, and until December 1st, they're redoing the threshold on 6 left. So they want to do the same thing as what they are doing right now. So preventing general aviation, business aviation to access the airport for landing only between 4 and 8 o'clock, something like that. So we are trying to find a better option than what we are currently doing for this time. And so by informing the council, we think that it's going to add a little bit more pressure for NAV Canada to find a solution that's going to work for everyone, and the outcome might be a bit more slot times to deal with for the commercial, but our clients deserve to have access to the airport 24/7. So we'll let you know about that.
Exactly so. And one of the nice things that came out of the NCAC was also IATA's support, the mention of how FAA handles that one-time traffic. I mean, we're experiencing it here in Toronto with the NBA finals, and in Montreal, of course, with Grand Prix. But one of the templates we may end up feeding to ADM is once I get from IATA the FAA model, perhaps we can mirror some of that program for the construction effort. So instead of petitioning them to make changes, we can come to them with a playbook that says, here's how you can run this. And again, we need access per hour. We need some level of percentage of those slots that are assigned. If the arrival rate is 54, maybe it's 10%, whatever that number is to reflect business aviation's use of that airport, we need to have access. In other words, it's not acceptable to say 0. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
I remember back in March, we were asking for some stats from some data, and I can't find in my notes, but if I remember, business aviation was or general aviation was I don't know if it was like 4 or 5% or like a very small number of the traffic during those peak hours. So it's hard to understand why they are preventing us from landing.
Yeah, and it's on that point that that's what we did with Toronto. I mean, it's about the same. We're about 7% business aviation of total movement at Pearson. This is Nav Canada source data. I didn't want to go to GTA for this one, and this is why I bring up the point of the partnership with Nav Canada. But this is how we've achieved in the past levels of flexibility on the construction efforts and saying business aviation needs access per hour. And at a minimum, it needs to be that percentage that we all play as utilization of these airports. So let's just call it for easy numbers, 10%, 50 slots. We need 5 slots an hour for business aviation. And in some cases, granted, they got to do this work, but we can work around it if they're mindful of the need that we have. But 0, so everyone knows, and I'll repeat it again, is 0 is not acceptable. So it's on us, and collectively our team there in Montreal with Simone, you play a big part of that. That we need to help influence ADM to see the right way. So any other comments? We're going to move to the compensation survey, but specifically about airport access. Any questions? We're going to touch it a little bit later, but apart from Toronto and Montreal, for those that are on the line, any other airport access issues that perhaps I'm not aware of or that we haven't discussed across the country, things that you think we should be aware of? I'd encourage you to type it into the chat or ask it now while all the mics are live. So we can continue with.
Sorry, Tony. Robert from Team. It's regarding Montreal Trudeau. We have flights coming from Bradley, Connecticut, with Saint-Hubert as destination, and a couple of flights which are late afternoon are within the time that the NOTAMs were not allowed to use Trudeau or CYUL as an alternate airport. Of course, we need CBAA, clearance once we land in Canada. The thing is that if you're not Trudeau base, normally you won't be allowed to use Montreal as alternate. But there's another airline that is based out of Trudeau, but they do have a contract out of Saint-Hubert, where they're flying, to the north at a mine project. My question is that these guys, even if they are Montreal Trudeau based, but they're operating out of Saint-Hubert 3 times, I think, a week for months, they're allowed to do it, but basically it's like they were based out of Saint-Hubert, and we cannot do that. Is there any way, because I did approach NAV Canada at the last ADM, I have responded to an email from one of their representatives. Unfortunately, I haven't had any answers from them, but do you think it would be possible with the association to look at some kind of a representation on the specific, operation for Pratt to be able to use the alternate on those flights?
Absolutely, and in fact, I'm glad you bring it up, because the exemption that received in Simone, you're there. I know you remember it, but that's the what is it, Nolanor? They run up to the mine in the north.
No, that one is Air Quebec.
Aircrete, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Aircrete, we
So
would
don't,
go
yes,
ahead. Steve.
go ahead. Sorry. So no, go ahead, Anthony.
I was just going to say that we have achieved some exemptions, and the ADM identified that some operators, like Bombardier, were critical to the airport, and they would look the other way for those operations. So we have achieved an exemption for an operator going to the north. Simone, I turn it to you that ADM has shown some flexibility, and I think we could do the same for Pratt.
Yeah,
No,
essentially, Robert, for like Bombardier, Quebec, Inuit, Nolinor, those companies, Raglan, they have been classified as essential services. So so the trick here would be for for your service to we would go to NAVCAN and ADM and ask that Pratt's shuttle be considered essential in the in case you need to divert. That would be so I can help you with that with and I can facilitate the communication with NAV Canada and ADM all that.
And I would say for the team Pratt, how we'd phrase that is that you are deemed essential because of the how big you are as an employer in the province of Quebec, and that your operations extend not only between Saint-Hubert and Montreal, but because you employ as many people as you are that essential service. And that would be the approach that we would try to educate ADM on, but we definitely take that up on your behalf. So let's connect as one point after the fact, maybe the three of us, Team Pratt, Simone, and I, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so then maybe I'll leave the mics open there just for a second. Any other questions on airport access? Anything pop to mind for some of the operators that are on the line? And what I'll do is I'll mute all the lines. So we'll talk a little bit about the comp survey. The last time that we did this for the association was 2017. Really, the compensation survey from our side is our attempt to help you manage the business, manage your business, and whether it's flight crew, whether it's your maintenance team, your operations planning department, any cabin service attendants, safety attendants that you have. The intent here is to make sure that you're aware of perhaps what you could say are best practices. So the information for the 2019 compensation survey is out. The results are free for members that choose to provide that data. So the big thing I'd ask here is that really would seek your participation with this comp survey. The more data and details we can get, the better the information will be. The link is there. I would encourage you to reach out to Aime with the association directly if you've got anything. If you don't have her email, if you got mine, send it to me directly. Either way, June 11th is our timeline. The reason why it's kind of close, we want to have the results ready for the convention in Calgary. I want to be able to walk through sort of the analysis and really make sure that we have the opportunity to explore this comp survey and how it can help you in your operations. So I'll move along there, but that's the comp survey. So let's see. Now the Minister of Transport, what I'll do is I'll unmute Merlin as well here while we're talking. So this was a letter, of course, that Minister Garneau sent out to operators. I don't know if you're on the line, you've probably received it. It basically goes on to request some information about de-icing operations. The TSB identified some of the challenges that not only our northern airports have, but more of our remote communities, places that we would still operate into that are not the majors. The de-ice level access that we have, the infrastructure, and frankly, the costs. So one of the things we wanted to do here is provide you with a template, something that Merlin is working. Again, one of our mission statements is to simplify business aviation. So here we want to create a template that you can sort of customize, just add sort of your letterhead, your name, your company, and borrow that base level content in your response back to Minister Garneau. But I think one of the things we as the association are going to share is certainly the cost of the infrastructure and frankly, even fluid application. You know, it's fine to say that there is an issue up there, but in service to the north, let's say, when we're out there, how can the government help the airport authority, whether it's through tax breaks, whatever it is that, you know, financially make sure that they have the equipment to meet the needs of the operators that are there. And I know some of your operations will touch on that, but certainly we are going to draft a response that talks about the cost, the burden of both the application of the fluid and the infrastructure. And on that note, with respect to fluid application, one of the things that you'll see us play a role in, and I'd like to kind of at least plant the seed here and perhaps continue the conversation in July, is one of the challenges we run into as individual business aircraft operators is that we often don't have the scale to negotiate at the individual airports for either preferential access and frankly preferential pricing. And one of the things we at the association have the opportunity to do on behalf of its membership is to become a signatory carrier to something like Aeromag or the airport authorities that are running these CDF facilities, so that we have preferential pricing and preferential access, and then we have a seat at the board to ensure that the right decisions are being taken when we run into issues. So what I wanted to leave you with there is perhaps the July is the conversation. I'd like to see if that sort of that idea of becoming a signatory carrier and how that could work and how it could benefit your operation. If you are interested in such a thing, you know, if you could reach out to me directly, I think it's an opportunity that effectively is really no cost to you, and it becomes ultimately cost savings and equal access, which in the end benefits us all and contributes to that safety. So maybe I'll turn to Merlin with respect to some of your comments on the minister's letter and what we're doing there. I don't know, Merlin, if your mic is hot.
Just a couple of general points. The target audience here was airlines. We were sideswiped. The department officials are not terribly happy with the minister's approach, but they report to the minister, so that's the way it is. I've got a draft. In fact, Anthony's got it for review, and it's basically talking about how you might respond, how really aware you are of what's going on, and then some comments on costs and availability. And then you tailor it to your liking and send it, but at least you'll have a draft to work with, and you won't start with a blank piece of paper. How much of this is going to take hold, I don't know, but it's better to respond than have them create some sort of a gray or blacklist because you didn't respond. There's nothing he can do if you don't. I mean, it's just one of the stupidest things I've seen. It lines up there with the simulator training for the 737 aircraft before it comes back. Simulator training meaning you have to do that to find two switches and flip them. Anyway, I digress. So it's there. I'll put it on the forum and use it as you wish. So we're almost ready to go as soon as Anthony gives me the okay with it.
Thanks, Merlin. And I'll turn to a question that was asked. Mark asked the question, what response to TC is actually required other than following the CARS as written now? So I think, Mark, that question kind of comes up in Merlin's response, where if you choose to take no action, potentially they'll just mark you on a list and look for you later on. But I think once we are ready to circulate this, and of course we've got the comfort of saying we're just coming into June right now. We've got till the end of the month, so we've got a month to basically review and prepare your response. And all we're trying to do is help make it a little bit easier for you to just kind of get your template, update it, push it across, and then basically off you go. And we'll hit on the same points like cost. We'll hit on the points of concern for us. So I think that probably addresses that. And from BC, thanks you for the insight, and certainly feel strongly that this approach treats all operators as non or weekly compliant, which is true. It kind of casts a pretty big brush on the operation. And And for those of us that, when we point to business aviation safety stats, and it's something we all work hard for, and very often, at least in business aviation, and the same could be said in airlines, of course, but we don't want our names out there. And that means doing what's right, knowing what's right and doing what's right. So you're spot on, BC. I'll unmute the microphones on this point here. Let me just get over there. Okay, everyone's alive there. Any comments from those that are on the line to this idea of the transport letter? What I'll end up doing is, as Merlin described, we'll circulate that letter once I've had the chance to, as Merlin indicated, just to make a quick review, and we'll share that on the forum and everywhere that you can find us. So we'll continue along to the next one. So NAV Canada, the relationship that the association, we touched on it a little bit with the Airport Authority, but I want to kind of rewind the tape. And for those, some of you may have heard this a little bit at some of the chapter meetings, but I want to stress first the relationship that the association has with NAV Canada. And the first is the fact that we get to nominate a member to their board representing the non-commercial user segment. And the CBAA has identified Dave Wager. Dave was the former director of aviation with Potash. He sits on the board with the Saskatoon Airport Authority. In addition to his experience at Potash, it was everything from the leadership of the department, maintenance experience, the airport authorities. So he's a great resource for us, and I think a vocal proponent of what's happening, in this case with business aviation, that non-commercial user, and how NAV Canada interfaces with us. The second piece with NAV Canada, we, and more particularly I, sit on the NAV Canada Advisory Council. And this council is a group of subject matter experts from across the country that get together periodically to inform the board of issues or opportunities that NAV Canada faces, and we review things like work with Rudy and his team, some of those VPs about projects that are rolling out, airspace modernization programs, stakeholder engagement. One of the recent success just this week, if you were here at the beginning of the call, Simone and I, we had the opportunity for the first time to represent business aviation at the NCAC. So I want to thank both Simone, Phil with Onyx Flight, Jameson with Exec Air, and Greg Young with Novajet. These four individuals took the time out of their day to come down here in Toronto and share that story of what business aviation's impact is and how NAV Canada can be a partner to our operations. A couple of the points that were raised there, obviously, the service level at the four majors, again, the Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver. ADS-B equipage, maybe I'll send this, let's see if I have this set right. Yes. In the chat, I've included a link. Generally, I've gone across the country, I've asked this question about ADS-B, and on balance, it looks like we, business aviation, aren't going to have a problem with space-based ADS-B. Remember that January of next year, the US rolls out their ADS-B program, and there are some differences, whether you install just a belly mount antenna or a fuselage top mounted antenna. And the reason why this comes up is that Transport Canada is making its decisions about ADS-B equipage, and it looks as if we'll probably end up going space-based to leverage the Aerion network that NAV Canada has put into the sky. So I thought bring that up, that we certainly talked about that, but I don't think, and I'd leave it to you to be aware of your operations. You can belly mount and be on a 978 frequency, and you may not, if you're on a 978, meet Canadian standards should they come down as 1090 ES only, which is basically the international standard. So that was brought up. Airport approach design and approval, as it relates to some of our rural airports. One of our members from the East, I'm looking on, I don't see him here now, but we're talking about NAV Canada's work on approach design and approval process for some of our rural airports, places that we still need to operate into, that we have the right approaches that meet the capability of the aircraft that we're flying. Last that I brought up with NAV Canada is certainly their role as a safety partner. And for those that are on the line here, they do a lot of heavy lifting with the CASOP, the Canadian Aviation Safety Officer Partnership. I think I've got the right acronym. The next event is in October, but if you haven't sent a member of your team, perhaps your safety officer or somebody empowered in that area of the business, I really would encourage you to go. I mean, it's a unique format where people can speak freely about the issues they've experienced, how they potentially overcame them, or perhaps that they're still stuck on some area of their business. And the composition is everybody from the airlines, a few select BA operators. I end up going because I'd like to kind of hear what's going on up there. So it's a great mix. October will be the timeline. We've got some of that information that we'll post on the website, but I encourage you to participate with CASOP. The last, as it relates to CBAA, is NAV Canada plays an important part of a partner in the dissemination of the data that allows us to create for you some safety trend data. So we rely on NAV Canada, and I encourage you to, in your relationships, appreciate NAV Canada for their partnership. They do play a big role with us. So with that said, that's kind of the NAV Canada conversation, and it ties together with our airport access and then future thinking about how we need to think about equipage for our aircraft. Any questions on the line as before we move to the next session? Everybody is live right now. Okay, we'll move to schedulers and dispatchers. So this is, the deadline is right around the corner, but I really do want to stress that, this is a unique opportunity. This is, a scholarship for Canadians by Canadians. And right now, the target here is for that member of your staff that is handling that scheduler dispatcher function. It's a $10,000 amount. Typically, we have 2 recipients, so they'll split that equally. But really, again, if it's, talking about their personal development, whether that's taking a MET course, whether that's going to a convention, just rounding them out to be better in your operation, this is our opportunity to recognize them. I'd encourage you to really just apply, put their names in, reach out to Amy in this case for that, out to me, whatever you need to get the information out there. But we really do want to recognize and promote some of the talent that we've got because we need them. So that's the schedulers and dispatchers. I've muted all the mics right there. So let's continue into the discussion about the 604 session in Calgary. So that again, the impetus of this call was, and as we go through the slides in the next little bit here, the intent in this section really is to plant the seed to get you thinking about the topics and the ideas we should be discussing at the session, which will take place Wednesday, July 10th. There are a number of reasons how this is going to help us. The first is it'll feed the plenary discussion on the 11th, on July 11th. Right now we've got Nick with Transport Canada, Kathy with TSB, and Ben with NAV Canada, along with CBSA, and forgive me, I don't remember the name there. But we're going to take the content, what level of sincerity we have on the issues that we kind of discuss on the 10th, and where it's relevant, feed it to those government agencies for their direct response. And you'll still have the opportunity to ask questions directly there, but this is our part in trying to get them the information that's a consequence. This all came about the relationship that I've had in this case with Doug Shields with Shaw. One of the things I learned from Doug and their operation is how in Calgary they get together. I learned the same with Scott McPherson down in Vancouver, being our liaison with the Vancouver Airport Authority in their chief pilots meeting. And that's what kind of got me thinking that we as the association needed to do something like this call today to connect us across the country. So the second part of that, it'll feed CBAA strategy. In other words, the content that comes out of these next sessions, whether it's today or in Calgary, will help us design the strategy and where we need to focus attention for the back half of 2019. And last, it's going to connect you with the ideas and your industry counterparts to learn best practices. I gave a chat recently at BCAC, and I love Donald Rumsfeld used this line when he was explaining the WMDs in the Iraq War. He said, there are known knowns. There's stuff that you know. There's known unknowns. There's stuff you don't know. And then there's the unknown unknowns. In other words, there's stuff you have no idea that you have no idea about. But I always add one more, and I think it's relevant to our industry, and that's the unknown known. And that is, what are we intentionally refusing to acknowledge? Sort of like, there's an elephant in the room, but we are not going to look that way. Think of 737 MAX and MCAS. And I think it'll come to pass when they finish these investigations that teams at Boeing knew that there were issues or designed it in such a way that they didn't have to look at the elephant in the room for whatever reason, pricing and certification and yada, yada. But that's an example of the unknown known. So the intent of this conversation really is to just kind of plant the seed. I'd encourage you to add some comments in the chat. If you don't want to ask that question directly, just feed me some ideas that you'd like to hear about. I will periodically continue to open up the mic as we've discussed. So let's continue into the first session. And I'll open this up. Merlin, I'm going to take your mic permanently off here so that you can add. There we go. So the first is 604 training. What I'd like to have here is our conversation focus on effectively the training burden that's placed on 604 operators. We know that, if you're sort of uneducated in the issue, you would say, oh, 703, 704, they got it pretty hard. Actually, it's 604 that has a very challenging training environment. And what needs to come out of this, we've got with Team Pratt that's on the line here. And as an example of one of the partnerships that we've got, they've raised with us directly, the association, some of their thoughts about how to streamline a training program using their risk analysis. And they've encouraged us to leverage Transport Canada to get them thinking about, hey, how can this work? If it meets their SMS risk assessment, why couldn't this training plan be spread out in a realistic time frame? And so that's something that we could bring up and discuss there. And if you're on the line thinking, geez Louise, I have no idea what you're talking about, this is maybe somehow where you leverage the team training port. I know Scott's on the line there, and maybe Scott, I'll also unblock you here. But it's leveraging a resource like Scott and the team at Training Port. But really, in the end, it's how does the association approach Transport Canada about building a plan that works for operators? Training to proficiency, what's working well, what isn't, what are the changes that you'd like to see that be of benefit. So this is the kind of the session on training. Merlin, I'll kick to you if you've got any additional comments maybe about this session before we continue.
Well, the Pratt initiative is a training matrix to deal with the annual training outside of the pilot training. That pilot training stuff is pretty well hardwired. You're not going to be able to make many changes there. And we've taken that one step with the training to proficiency, which is beyond what anybody else has on offer. So the latest thing now from Transport is they're waiting for us to make an application for an exemption based on the matrix and the risk assessment that Pratt has done. It would help me a lot if I had more than one operator sponsoring this, because in the end, we would hope to get a general exemption applicable to anybody who wanted to use it. So I'm sure it'll be discussed further. There's no way we'll get anything approved by the time the convention rolls around, but we will certainly be working on it in the near future. So if you're interested in getting on board with that, drop me an email. And we'll go on from there. I think Pratt's here right now, so I would ask the question, can I put that matrix on the forum for people to look at?
Their mics are open, Team Pratt.
Yes, I had to unmute. Yes, we have, Rabbi, did you send the latest matrix to Merlin?
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, Mark, I'm working on updating the latest matrix based on, some discussion with training ports. So I want the association to get, you know, a better tool so that it's easy to understand to everyone. When you're working to something, you know what you want to say, but now that somebody else may have looked at it, I just want to be sure it's very clear to everyone.
Okay.
Okay, so as soon as you've got that done, Robert, and send it to me, I'll publish it on the forum, and I'll also start working on the exemption application.
Okay.
That's noted.
It's Scott here. Am I live on the mic?
Yeah.
You are, Scott. We can hear you.
Oh, thank you. It's for those who don't know me, Scott McPherson. I've been in corporate for 30 years, and I started Training Port to try and respond to this issue that we all have. And I was not aware that we were developing a matrix with Pratt, but that's because the company's grown to the point where I'm not involved daily. However, if you'd like, I'd be happy to help. Merlin and I traveled to Tower C a couple of years ago now, to try and help them understand how this burden was unmanageable for business aviation. I've written many blogs about how to simplify and customize training. It certainly made many applications or submissions to transport during the 604 debacle. But I'd be glad to help out in any way. This is you're singing the words that I've been screaming for a long time. So I hope we get success this time.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the feedback, Scott. So that's definitely something that, we will take away. And remember, I mentioned at the beginning that this is an example of something that will feed into the strategy that we undertake on your behalf, and working together. Hopefully, we can start to make some of these changes with transport that benefit us all. Again, simplifying business aviation. So I appreciate the feedback. Maybe one comment I'd also make, Merlin, when you brought up the idea of feedback, I would encourage you, if you're on the line, one, I'd let you know that the association's undertaking some, as we speak, making an investment in our website and how we present ourselves online. Not only have I seen it, but I've also heard pretty loud and clear, whether it's how folks visit our site, predominantly on mobile and then desktop, but really it's making sure that we are reaching you in a way that is easy and gets you the information. So I'm making a plug here for the forum. If you don't have access, if you've got some comments that'll help us improve it, know that we are working on that now in terms of speed and stability and mobile browser. We've heard things about, I understand some of the challenges with email, but I would encourage you to participate. That's another way that we can stay connected on these topics. So that's what I'll say here before we move on. Yeah, go ahead.
Could I add, Anthony, that if you haven't selected follow all on that website, please do, because anything that I know, you get to know as soon as I know it by an email, and we don't post any advertise or anything like that. It's all operational information. That as soon as I post it, you'll get an email on it. So if you're not connected in that way, I really encourage you to do it. And as Anthony said, we're making improvements to that forum as quickly as we can.
Perfect. Thanks, Marlon. Okay, well then, no questions in the chat, and the mic's been open. I'll leave it open for a little bit here, and if there's any noise, we'll zap it quiet. We'll move to the idea of airport operations. So here, what I wanted to talk about and get you thinking, again, think outside of the Toronto-Montreal. We kicked the call off with that, but I want to think about, costs. I think there is space for us at the association, say, to track. Maybe let's start at the four majors and then maybe extend it to some of the big secondary airports, let's call them, but really start to track the costs for business aviation. Because what I want to know is where we're starting to feel pain before it gets to a tipping point where, maybe I'm on a chapter meeting tour or something, and we're walking into Edmonton, we're going to talk about Bakerville, or we're in Atlantic Canada and we're talking about, Fox Harbor, Antigonish, something like that, where there's an issue, or an airport closure in the West. If you're hearing these things, please do bring them back. If you're experiencing any issues, please give them back. But this is a topic we'll spend a little bit more time at the convention talking about operational issues at airports, approach design, fee structure, FBOs, etc. So definitely an area of focus for us on airport operations. I've left the microphones open, so if you'd like, feel free to ask a question. There isn't too much background noise right now. We'll move to CBSA. Specifically, really need to have a discussion on service levels. I know, Simone, you raised some of the valid points about the use of automation where possible. I mean, it's 2019, and I kind of giggle when we still talk about sending a fax. Sometimes I feel like sending a ringtone like that, but we need to encourage the CBSA to help us. At this point, I always like to bring up, if you're not aware of the CanPass program, if you're not taking full advantage of that CanPass program, I think that's an opportunity for you in these flight ops leadership roles to make sure that you've got some of those passengers identified and approved. This will go a long way in helping you sort of minimize the customs burden. But definitely, those are the 2 points that I'd raise here is service level CBSA, and definitely take a look to see if there's any relevance, if it fits the CanPass program for your corporate operations. So that'll be a discussion there.
Anthony, can you give me a couple of minutes? I just want to, since the people are on the line, I just want to share my conversation with one of the superintendent at the TRC.
Absolutely, go ahead, Simone. Yeah, no problem.
So that was maybe a couple of weeks ago, because and I'm sure you're encountering the same issues. You call and you wait half an hour, 45 minutes, and you get at some point you get a busy signal. So I spoke with the superintendent Bint at the TRC, and what they are encountering right now is the month of April and May are their peak times because people are getting ready with their boat, and obviously the TRC in Hamilton is handling the boat operation, sea operation, air, and so they are just overwhelmed. They are planning to hire, and if it's not done, 40 students to help out during the summertime. And what I didn't know is the agents in Hamilton and the TRC, and I'm not sure exactly since when, but they do go on site. They do go outside of their office to clear flights from Swoop and Norwegian. So whether it's like 1 or 2 officers, so when they leave the office, so that's less people to get the calls. I've asked about what can be done, electronic submission. Can there be a dedicated desk for general aviation, business aviation? The superintendent was quite open to my to my suggestion, but at some point gave me the everything has to go through Ottawa. So my only advice right now is keep track of or keep notes of all the delays that you are encountering, and I don't know, Anthony, if we should record everything from all the operators and then at some point show up at CBSA in Ottawa and say, hey, that's enough. And
as far as headquarters goes, they've got the list of asks. What I'd love to have is a bunch of data to support it, to push it. They're willing to look at it, but like every other agency in town here, they're short of people. But I've got good contacts, and a lot, I keep it's on my reminders list. So every quarter I go and ask them again how much progress they've made.
Yeah.
There's 2 things that I've been pushing. One is for email instead of telephone, and the other one is for those of you that are operating commercially is to use the IAPI system to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So both of those things have had some sort of acceptance, but can't get them off top dead center. If there's any other improvements that you have suggestions on, then please provide them. But data. If
Yeah.
if I could give them a spreadsheet with 100 examples on it of 45-minute delays, that would be very helpful in pushing it in headquarters.
And I think that would definitely be the ask. It is an example of what we could do, whether that's, even just before the convention. So for those that are on the line and those that are going to listen to this after the fact, I'd follow up with that, Simone. Exactly that. Please, if your operations are experiencing any delays or issues with CBSA, jot them down. Mark, you have a question. CBSA is coming to the convention. They're going to be there on the plenary session asking or responding to our questions. So please take the time to jot the data down, share as much as you're willing to share that allows us to paint the picture of the problem you're experiencing. We don't need to know your PAX details, and we don't want to know that. I just want to know generally, where were you? What was the time of day or aircraft operation, PAX on board total, and what the issue is. And we can, with Merlin's support, get this to the right people, and they're definitely going to be there to respond to us on the 11th. So definitely an opportunity for us. So great.
Yeah, I'm collecting the data, so I'll send you some info.
Simon, sorry, Anthony, it's Team Pratt here, Joe. Simon, are you willing to share your template, at least so we can have an understanding of what you're actually requesting on that data, so we could also be in line and in sync?
Oh no, yeah. So well, it's very simple, Joe. We're just asking the crew, like, the time they called, how much time they waited, and that's essentially, just that information, like the date, the location, and how long they waited.
And are you going as far into detail in terms of the badge number of who you spoke with as well too?
Well, if they do speak with someone, and especially it happened to us, what we have seen frequently is they've done the first call, the fax has been sent, and they update the ETA, and they show up on the ground, and the officer showing up says, no, we didn't have anything, and then with the batch number we track that as well. In any case, if it's an issue with the TRC officer over the phone, we'll ask for the badge number. Sometimes they will refuse to give it. But yeah, so yeah, we're taking as much as possible, and we'll send that to the CBAA.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Would it be adequate for the association to have a common form, so it will maybe ease, getting all the data together, rather than, I understand that you have a good one, but if everybody had his own, for the interpretation of it, it's just a suggestion, maybe a quick Excel form from the association available on the CBAA site, and then we're gonna.
We could absolutely do that. In fact, I was just thinking of we can create an office form. So it'll be a link, and you'll be able to do it on a mobile device. So the idea would be you could get your crew on an iPhone or Android, whatever system they're using, iPad, and yeah, definitely we'll be able to create that. And I would echo the comment, BC just got it. If they are not giving you your badge number, their badge number, that is definitely a reportable thing. You want both on the initial call, if you make that, and then the arrival call, definitely want to get badge numbers in both those scenarios. So if you are not getting that, like Simone's comment that if they refuse to provide it, just try to get as much detail as, hey, this was the airport, this was the time UTC that this happened, and I called the, Hamilton or whoever it is, as much data as we can get, because that will go a long way. We should be able to get that information, because it will, as BC says, it'll save your butt. So definitely some great comments there.
And don't be afraid about getting the badge number, because at the end of the day, if they take this in hand in headquarters, they'll take this whole data package we have and take it to the senior people who are holding the purse strings. So it's not a bad thing. Any of this stuff, it's not going to be taken pejoratively, at least for the people I'm talking to.
Great. Okay, well then let's, with the time that we've got here, we've got about, let's call it 20 odd minutes. So I've got just about maybe 5 or 6 more slides to kind of go through. So let's move to TC inspections, the targeted inspections, and some of the PVIs that are coming. So certainly I'll kick to Merlin here, but just as a high level, you know, really, for those that have participated in the targeted inspections to date and have fed Merlin some of the results of that, of their inspection, I want to take the time to thank you for helping the association and its membership get better. It's allowed us to share some best practices for those that have that were scheduled still to go after you had conducted your targeted inspection. It's that kind of data sharing that will make us all better. So Merlin, I kick it to you to talk a little bit about the targeted inspections and PVIs and some of the things that you think are important for everyone to know.
Well, they started out by suggesting 66 of our members were going to be inspected. 35 have been. There's another 10 outstanding, and the other remainder, for one reason or another, they either quit operating or TC has decided they don't have the resources to pursue it. So as far as I know, that targeted inspection program is dead. I mean, there may be some that are residual that are being done in April, May, because they weren't done before the March 31st deadline. But be that as it may, we've got the information that we need, at least a good sample. There was 15 of the 35 I've got so far that had no findings. The rest, there were findings on the SMS, quality assurance, and training deficiencies. Some mainly recording of stuff. The SMS, the biggest thing had to do with not including your audit findings in there and doing root cause analysis to get to your corrective actions. I'll be meeting as soon as I can get together with the OPI in Ottawa to compare notes, and then after that we'll publish lessons learned and anything else that makes sense. But like everything else in headquarters in Ottawa, they're desperately short-staffed, so everything takes twice as long, if not 3 times as long as you might think. I know of 3 PVIs that have been reported to me that are being scheduled are being scheduled. So they're now going into what I would consider steady state inspections of 604 operators, which means a full program validation inspection covering absolutely everything. There's advisory circulars on what they're doing. So anybody who's been informed of that inspection, I've been working with them. And I would encourage you, if you hear somebody or if you're involved yourself, drop me an email and I'll track all that information and provide whatever help I can going forward. That's all I have on that, Anthony.
I appreciate it. No, it's perfect. I mean, it's definitely an awareness for the operators. And again, the learnings that we get out of that, we're going to share with you so that if you do get that letter, that phone call, that email, question maybe, Merlin from BC, what size of 604, of the 3 that you've got awareness to that are getting a PVI, how big are their flight departments? Is there any data that's coming out in terms of a common theme?
I can tell you who they are, but I have to drag up the spreadsheet. I'll put it out to all when I get it, okay?
Sounds good. So we'll definitely get that back to BC, but we'll see if there's any common threads. So again, an ask there would be, if you're getting a letter, getting that email, getting that phone call, and TC wants to knock on your door to do a PVI, establish that line of communication with Merlin so that we can help you prepare and make sure that you're aware of those things. Okay, so let's go to let's go to the next slide. I'm just moving things around. There we go. So this one is safety management systems itself, an opportunity for us to gauge sort of what are our best practices that you're experiencing, everything from what you do and what other operators are doing, the tools that you're using. Certainly, the discussion about the opportunity with the CBAA tool and those that you're using, but really it's about us to share those best practices. So I would leave it maybe Merlin to make some comments on SMS and best practices, but definitely an area that I want to plant the seed here is to get us thinking about, very often I find that, an operator in Vancouver will be doing something different from an operator in Halifax. And if you weren't aware of one reason or another, maybe that makes an improvement to your operation. and frankly, self-serving. I want to understand where either the tools that we're providing or the data that we're giving out, how that makes a difference to your operation. So I want to kind of get an understanding of SMS in your operation. So I don't know, Merlin, if you get any comments to add to that, but that's certainly a topic of discussion we'll plan for the 604 session.
Well, the only thing I can do is encourage people to use the online SMS, and if not, if they've got issues, then get back to me with them. There isn't a groundswell of discussion other than in reaction to the targeted inspection. So I don't know where we can go with this unless more operators want to participate.
It's great that I see Mark's comment regarding without the RMS, without that tool, they're claiming that it would be tough to pass that audit. So I appreciate the support there, and that's frankly what I want to hear. I want to hear the good stuff, but I also want to hear the bad stuff. I want to hear if you're having issues updating information, if there's too many fields, help us make this better. And if that's the tool that we all choose to support and go forward, that's great. If not, it helps us just do what's right for our operators. So I really would appreciate that direct level of feedback on the tool and how we can all make this better.
I think what I liked about the tool was that when we had some, because Pratt Whitney has internal confidentiality that we can't, especially in regards to employees. When we got in contact with Merlin and the team and we said, guys, could you change it, modify it, can you adapt it to this environment we're in? It was done rapidly, and it was done to the point that we only use the tool to log in and to do all of our safety assessments and everything that happens on our operation. When Transport Canada did the PVI inspection, it was kind of an inspection, but at the same time, it was very iterative in the sense that they were asking stuff. We were opening module, we were doing everything that we would be opening, especially from an SMS perspective, using the tool. They couldn't say anything because it met the requirement, and it really helped us to keep it simple, and it streamlines the process. So we've focused. We used to have our own independent system. We stopped that system, and now everything goes into the RMS CBAA system.
I appreciate the feedback, Mark. Thanks for that. Thanks.
It's meant to be a minimum compliance system. It's passed the tests of the for those who are using it as Pratt and Whitney was. And there's still people out there wanting to spend a bunch of money on something that's fancier. And I've been encouraging them to really have a look at what we're providing before they go and spend the extra dollars, especially the small operators. To BC's question, I've actually got 4 companies that have indicated they're going to be inspected. The biggest one is Syncrude. The other ones are 1 and 2 airplanes. So I can't remember how many Syncrude's flying right now, but they would be would have the most. Them and maybe Quebec.
Exactly. So you definitely, if you're anywhere in those range of operations, we could be subject to that. So it's good to start
from a 1 plane PC-12 guy to all the way up to the big one.
Perfect.
The thing important to understand with the PVI inspection is that either you have 1 aircraft or you have 5 aircraft. It's not because you have more or less that's going to be easier. It's actually harder for a smaller operator to pass in a big, which has more means to.
Well, that's because some of the rules and regulations are designed for people who actually have data because they've got a bigger operation. But we're going to see if we can sort that out once the final reports are in on the targeted inspection. The regulations are over the top. There's no doubt about it.
And I'll share just even, my personal story that, leading when I was at the Walmart and leading that team, you often, if you don't have that level of experience and you haven't developed yet that subject matter expertise, and you talk about that unknown, whether you're a small operator or a large operator, if you're not really digging down into the weeds on some of the stuff, you might miss it. Just because it worked in the past doesn't mean it's going to work going forward. And all we're trying to do here is to help educate people on what these best practices are. And from Mark and the team at Pratt, when you experience that, BC your operations, Doug and Simone, these are the kinds of things we need to get out there to the others in their departments. And so this is the kind of conversation I think that we can have that'll be of benefit. So let's move to, with 9 minutes, I want to make sure that I'm respectful of your time. I've only got a total of 3 content slides and 1 sort of wrap-up thank you slide. So let's talk a little bit about fuel. Best practices, in particular, an update on carbon tax, you know, the 4 provinces in Canada, New Brunswick, Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, you know, what's happening with carbon tax. I've met with CRA, I've got another meeting with them tomorrow again, talking about, you know, what is interjurisdictional operators, who can apply. I mean, let's be frank. I mean, I've even asked some of our subject matter experts on tax and finance to distill some of the description of the carbon tax and who can apply for exemptions, and even they're still working on it. Now, I've got a great document from that I've received from CRA that works to distill some of that. But what I want to also talk about is, you know, what are fuel savings? I mean, who's doing the best practice on fuel rebates? That's come up with one of our operator discussions recently. What are you doing on fuel rebates in Canada, internationally? And again, just creating a forum of best practices. I may pick on some in the audience just to kind of tell their story, but I'd encourage you to start thinking about some of these things as well. Let's see, Corsia and EU ETS. This idea of who is impacted, the best practices for those that are under the thresholds. You know, just today we've happened to push some material out on the forum, but again, it's getting an awareness to, hey, not majority are likely to get below those thresholds. So what are the best practices there? How should you be tracking data just to kind of have that available to you, so that in the event you're questioned, you've got some of that data modeling. So that's the fuel component. We'll move to the cars and some of the modernization effort, the changing regulations and their impact. I mean, everything from, if you're a 704, 703 style operator, you know, what is the impact of flight and duty time? And I know Merlin, the discussions on creating a committee, I know we've got a long implementation period where this comes into play, but know that we are looking to get your support, your ideas, so that we can continue to influence TC on, you know, FRMS exemption and the challenges and the difficulty and cost associated with receiving an exemption for FRMS. The modernization of the regs themselves. I mean, we've got over 1,300 identified CARS review items that need to be addressed, and we're participating with TC in this modernization effort. So maybe I'll kick it to Merlin. Anything I've missed there with respect to CARS and some of the changing regulations, but this is the topic we want to have with the session in Calgary.
We put together a committee or working group on fatigue, but basically it's dormant right now because there hasn't been much of a reaction from members. So if there's more work to be done, then I'm waiting to hear what needs to be done. The FRMS stuff is there. I mean, they've come part way, but if we're going to take the next steps, then we need to produce some safety cases for it. If you aren't doing that yourself, then you try and contract it. Pulsar's the only one out there, and basically he's priced himself out of the business from everything I've heard. So that's where we are. I'm just waiting for direction from members.
I really think that is the key point to make there. If you're on the call and you're 703, 704, I know that it seems like it's really far down the road, but if we're going to try to manage this effort, really the call to action here would be just help us help you. Let's get together to understand what our concerns, what your concerns are. You're going to have, you know, costs and implementation periods, and what we need to do is to make sure that we are aligned so that the best possible outcome is achieved. And we know that 604 continues to be exempt, but I'd encourage you, even if you're a 604 operator and you're looking into this conversation, you're thinking, great, and it doesn't involve me, I would encourage you just to kind of keep an eye on this stuff. And not that I anticipate that it's coming to 604 at all. I just mean to say that maybe your flight crews are going to ask the questions about, you know, fatigue and the science behind it, etc. So I would encourage you, if you're a straight 604 operator, don't just turn away from it. Make sure that you're tuned in and you're abreast of what's happening here. Maybe a question really quickly before I go back to the slides. BC asked a question on carbon tax and Ontario exemption. BC, I'll provide that CRA letter. It's a lot of content. I'm going to distill it. There are certain cases, but right now, one of the qualifying standards to be exempt is you need to be under a commercial service. And one of the things we're pushing back on saying is, why does that need to be the case? In addition, with all of the provinces, you know, I think Alberta is undergoing some efforts with carbon tax. There are lawsuits in place. This is such a fluid effort that what I could confirm today will probably change tomorrow. But I think what we'll start with is the source material from CRA about the definition of you know, if you're an FBO operator, how does the FBO apply for an exemption? If you're the operator there, what do you need to learn about interjurisdictional operations and what qualifies, etc. So we'll start with the source material with CRA. So let's continue. Let's go to NAV Canada here. I don't want to spend too much time because we talked about it, but ADSB, 1090 ES versus 970, the idea of space-based ADSB. I don't think this is going to be an issue for business aviation operation, typically because we're operating aircraft that either have TCAS 2 or you've already installed or it's come from the OEM, equipped in such a way that you're fit for international operations the minute you get the aircraft. But a point I'd bring up in the relationship is PDC clearances. So a lot of the aircraft that we all fly today have the capability to seek PDC clearance. And one of the operator concerns, of course, is that, you know, you can easily get that in the States, but when you come to Canada, why is that an issue? So it's you know, for the operators that are out there, you know, is this an issue for you? I imagine it is. That's why I want to kind of bring it up. But I want to influence NAV Canada to help us leverage the technology that we've got in these aircraft. There's no reason that it should be just as simple for our 604, 703, 704 operators in Canada to request a PDC clearance before they leave. So I'm looking at the questions, open mic, if there's any questions on NAV Canada or the regs. I'll go to sort of the last slide then. Wow, we have 2 minutes. Oh, look at this. Okay, good. So this slide kind of ties itself to the idea of the human resources challenges. And one of the observations that I've had in sort of traveling the country and meeting with different folks is obviously we're experiencing some change in leadership. And that can be just not even at the top within your organization. That could be just within. Maybe it's training and standards. It's maybe a new chief pilot that you're promoting. And one of the things we'd like to bring up is, you know, resources for mentoring. And it's a topic that I know Scott's going to be participating in. And I think this is us making sure that we're equipping the new talent that's in the industry, making sure that they're aware of and we're supporting them in these new roles that they're taking on. We all know that there's a war for talent. That doesn't matter if you're a pilot, a mechanic, etc., a cabin safety attendant, they're all there. And I think this is an opportunity for us to talk about aviation department leadership. You know, one of the things when we, as a side note, when we were planning the convention, we had a discussion about, you know, the CAM program, the Certified Aviation Manager, I think I got that right, the NBAA hosts. And, you know, we didn't really have a lot of adoption in the past about that. And what I want to do is explore whether or not we see that in Canada as an opportunity. And I do think that there's an opportunity for that. And I want to encourage, you know, these best practices. People, when they come into a department, when you hire somebody or when you've got somebody there, you know, pay is going to be one issue. That's how we're helping you in the compensation survey. Training plans is part of that. In other words, when I get here, what does good look like? What are the KPIs? How long do I need to spend? And then last is certainly that professional development. And again, this is how I tie the schedules and dispatchers piece together. So I do think that there's a place for us to talk about aviation department leadership, especially as we see some folks depart our industry and new folks come in and take on new roles. So maybe as I literally would close with this, I want to thank you for taking the time. We're 1 minute over, but I want to thank you for taking the time and participating. This was our first attempt at this, and I hope that you found the information in the forum useful. I want to continue from the association perspective, leveraging a tool like this. I can tell you that I've made some notes specifically around the learnings we had on CBAA. We will create an easy to use tool to consolidate the data. And I'm just really looking forward to the convention. Quick plug again, free member. If you're a member, you get a free all access pass. I really hope to see you there. And definitely feel free to reach out to myself, to Merlin, to Amy. We're here to support you and your operations. And again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Anthony.
Take care, guys. We'll see you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Anthony. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.